All right, here we go. So, good morning. And as usual, before we begin, let's observe 1 minute of silence. All right, just come back to the session and we will get started. So, yesterday we were talking about what are the root cause of the challenges or the issues that we face. And we started off saying that, the first one is the victim mentality that we all have within ourselves. That is somehow we are associating that with how we see ourselves. So the first level is our own suffering. It is not created by anybody, but then our own perception of who we are, right? So when I say who we are, we have our own thing that, okay, I am good, I am bad, I look like this, I am not looking like this, and we have a lot of things. So the first problem, it starts with the identifying with our own self, right? So that is where it comes from. I am not good enough, or when we are talking about, like, I'm not worthy, and all these things that we create for our own self, that is, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm unlovable, etc. and etc. And the second level is we identify with people. So with people, what happens is generally it becomes like my belief versus your belief. And how, like, we have a conflicting perspectives or ideas. Then we have come between my thoughts, my ideas, my belief, and yours is this. So and then we fight between with the other person. And the third one is situations. So in life, when we look at the situation, either we're completely happy about a situation or we are unhappy about the situation. So where is that happiness of the situation comes from is, it is from a place of our expectation or the idea that the situation should be like in certain way, right? So we think that if the external situation or today, if it becomes like this, then I'll be happy. If not, I will be unhappy. So that is primarily with expectations. So in the past, we have seen that the constructs of identities, and we also said, I mean, when we discussed about identities, I said it is also about your ideas, perspectives, thoughts, belief, and etc. Like, anything we are identifying ourselves with, and with identity, we are suffering, right? The suffering, the root cause of all the sufferings are identities. And if you look at the problems, why it happens, generally we limit ourselves with very specific small identities. When I say that, from our birth, we try to classify ourselves that, oh, I am this, I am that. And then for an example, first for me, like, I would just relate myself and say my region is, okay, I'm Tamilian, right? I was born in Tamil Nadu, so I would say I'm a Tamilian and I speak Tamil. And then we go on with the culture and like different perspective. It can be we can, culture, country, ideas, thoughts. It can be anything we associate with that. And then moment someone comes and challenges at any of these things, we go out of order. We wanted to pick a fight with the other person and then prove that my identity is superior to the other person identity. So to give you one small example, so my wife, she's from Kerala, right? So Tamil Nadu and Kerala, it is a neighboring states. And for before our marriage, we had to go through a long period of, like, the issue between families. I mean, when I say families, primarily, like, my wife's family, they were not so receptive of the idea that I am from Tamil Nadu and then willing to marry her. And if you look at in actual construct, like Tamil Nadu border would be like, 5 kilometer away from her place. right? Wherever our father belongs to, it is 5 kilometers. Just imagine, it's 5 kilometers. The identity of the person completely changes from Tamilian to Malayali. The language changes because obviously India is a country of diversities, right? So we have a different diversities. So the language changes, the culture changes, and the identity of Tamilian, Malayali, that also changes. So then they were not receptive to idea that to getting her married to me because I'm a Tamilian, right? So they said that we will marry her to anybody but not you. And when I'm talking about the small difference, just specific to 5 kilometer radius, and no one knows who draw that, like, the line of, say, this is belongs to Tamilian, this belongs to Malayali. Yes, over a period of time, people evolved in a different ways, right? And nobody can say that this is right, this is wrong. But then the attachment to the identities, attachment to religion, that causes all the problems in the world, if you look at it, right? So everything, even if you pick up any conversation on an argument with somebody, it is nothing but we are trying to prove that my identity is superior to the other person's identity. So that is where the whole problem of me or we relating to one specific identity comes from. So that being said, the $1 million question is, how do we break away from identities? So it can be $1 million question or it can be $1 trillion question, because that will end most of our suffering. It is either self-made identities or identities about our own self or how people should be or how the situation should be. We need to break away. So that is where one primary concept of, like, creating the identity which is larger than us, like, which is much much bigger. So that is where the idea, I'm sure that most of you must have heard of aham brahmasmi, right? Aham, I, Brahma, it is a creator. Asmi is am, right? So I am Brahma, like I am the creator, I am the God, I am the creation, both creation as well as the creator. I'm the true essence, I'm everything, right? So aham brahmasmi as a word, when we talk about it, when we say it out loud, it is primarily what you're saying is your identity is not narrowed down. It is spreading across the whole universe, and the cosmic address that you get, the address of you becomes not so small and narrow. Instead of saying I'm so religion, I mean culture and region, country, and etc. Instead, you create an identity for yourself which is much larger, which is the whole cosmic address, right? We are taking the identity of the whole cosmos, whole creation. And there is no time to it, there is no space to it, there is no differentiation to it. So that is where I somehow relate that aham brahmasmi as a word or as a being of supreme understanding comes from. So what happens when we understand aham brahmasmi? So one is, of course, like, intellectually understanding the whole idea of everything is connected and we are all one and etc. Though it may sound philosophically good, however, time to time we also go and question why it is, right? How it is possible. So that is where I thought today's session probably we should discuss a little more about how we are all interconnected. Like, there is one beautiful word called interbecoming, right? Inter becoming. So we are all, like, connected together, and we are becoming as a whole consciousness, right? The cosmic consciousness in a whole different level altogether. So that is where we are going to lead and understand that when you're talking about aham brahmasmi, how it is a larger self or the larger identity which comes from a place of completely being humble. It is not that when I am saying that I am God, I am saying that from a place of ego or being a superior to anybody or anything. But then it is much more of from a place of being humble. You feel that you're connected with everything, right? Everyone, every being. So there is no differentiation. So that's how I see the whole idea of aham brahmasmi. So that leads to one question is, how do we feel? Like, yes, we understand every spiritual tradition talks about how we are all interconnected and everything is connected and aham brahmasmi and etc. But then how do we put it in a scientific perspective? So, or how to get out of the intellectual understanding, how do we relate completely in the core form of, even if you're a logical person, scientific person, you need that answer. So that is exactly is what we are going to discuss today. So that being said, I quickly want to touch upon one of my personal experience, which profoundly changed me to see the world differently. So that exactly, I know the date. It is 28th Feb 2015. So 28th February, like on that specific day, I watched a video. It is by the one of the founder of Google X projects. This guy's name is Tom Chi, right? Tom Chi is primarily, he comes from a background of a scientist. He's a scientist, scholar, and then he worked and researched about astrophysics and etc. Right? So this guy, one of the conversation that I watched, and he talks about three stories. He shares three stories, which we will go into it. And then, of course, I will share the link to this whole video because that is a 32 minutes video. And that can help you to have a better understanding than I'm saying. But before we go there, so what happened to me was after watching that video on the 28th Feb 2015, the next day morning, when I woke up, somewhere I had this strange feeling that I have figured out all those things. Like, there is some level of connectedness I felt when the next day morning, the 1st of March 2015, when I was sitting in my balcony and then I was meditating. For some strange reason, I can say, like, I felt connected with everything in front of me. There was, of course, nothing like, nothing fancy about a mountain ranges or river or something like that. It is nothing but primarily like, buildings and a sky. But then somehow I felt connected to all those things. And that night I also went through my own, like, the morning, first thing I did was when I woke up, I just started opening the Evernote is the app that I use. I just opened it and start typing. So primarily what I typed was, it is my understanding about every single concepts and ideas. Some of it all made sense to me from the perspective of how we are all interconnected. So from there, let's go into what he talks about, the interconnectedness. So Tom Chi talks about three stories. He says the first story is a story of heart, and the second story is story of our breath, and the third story is story of mind. So in the first story, the story of heart, it goes like this. So what he says is, as this moment, like, as I'm speaking to you, as you're listening to this session, so you all know that your heart beats. It's beating every single minute. So why does heart beat? Why is it beating all the time? It is only one single purpose of our beat is to circulate the blood, right? The primary reason rather. So when you're talking about blood circulation and then taking all the oxygens towards each cells and making making it come alive. So what's happening is in the each blood there is a molecule of hemoglobin, and in hemoglobin, in the centermost, the heart of the hemoglobin is one single iron atom. So that single iron atom, which is responsible to hold the oxygen in the bloodstream, right? So that is exactly how whenever you're breathing, the oxygen goes and attached to that specific hemoglobin, and then that carries to each cell to make us as a human being and the living being. So when you're looking at that one single iron atom in a hemoglobin, he says that there is no way in the universe the iron as a particle it can exist in the whole universe, because it is when the universe was formed, the iron was never there. That is what the science says. It is not me or anybody saying, but then this, according to science, there was hydrogen and helium and etc., but there was never an iron. So how does that iron form? So the iron form, he says, it is like supernova and intergalactic collisions. A star, it is bursting and then becoming it's the continuous destruction and construction. It is completely bursting out and then becoming. So, and then he talks about, so why this star has to do that? Why the star has to go through this way of exploding and coming together. So he says that, so that becomes because of intergalactic, collusion. The intergalactic is two galaxies are colliding to each other, and that way the each stars collide to each other. And then he goes on further up, he goes on and then talks about, if as per the present science, if you take a step back and then look at the whole of the observable universe or the whole cosmos, he says that every single galaxy has its own trajectory, and that they call it as immeasurable universe. Or there is another word he uses, I forgot Lanakia, or yeah, okay, I'm just not getting the word. So probably you can get it. So what he says is, he says it is immeasurable universe. So from that perspective, when you start looking at things across in the world, every single heartbeat that reminds us that we are all come from the same place. That is, we sometimes we say that we are nothing but a stardust loosely, but here the very single, like the every hemoglobin and every single particle that whenever the heart beats, which is carrying it inside you, it is nothing but we are all connected from the same source. And that's how the first story of the the story of heart ends. Then he goes on to say the story of our breath. So when you're talking about a breath, so obviously we know that the oxygen is a primary thing, primary compound which we all need to live in this life, right? Without oxygen, of course, there is no human being. So Earth become the habitable planet after the atmosphere is formed, and then the ozone layer is formed, and then the oxygen is there. Then we started the multi-cell organism started developing, and then we started getting our own as a different species that we started evolving. So what he says is, so 3 billion years ago, there is no way in atmosphere oxygen exists. There was no oxygen. So what exactly was this? Primarily it is our hydrogens and carbon dioxide and etc. So with that condition, of course, there is no way that human beings are possible. At least in the present physiology, it is not possible, right? So without oxygen, it's not possible. So what happened? Then he talks about there is one single cell organism called cyanobacteria. So what he talks about cyanobacteria is the cyanobacteria. This is the one which identified the whole the game of using sun's energy and converting carbon dioxide into oxygen. And then what he goes on to say is from the cyanobacteria, it is not an easy process that it can create oxygen overnight. It took millions and billions of years. Literally, it took from then that point in time to took another 2.4 billion years to ensure that there is an oxygen in our atmosphere. Because according to him, he says that the ozone layer itself is formed, say 600 millions of years ago. So it took the cyanobacteria for so long to create oxygen in the atmosphere, because whenever it was initially start creating it, the ozone, I mean the ocean, like the seas, they absorb it, then the earth absorbs it, then it starts filling up the earth atmosphere, and that eventually helped us to create a multi-level organisms. So what he talks about is the ozone layer. It is a result of that tiny one cell organism called cyanobacteria, which helped us to create. So where he was leading to from there is, it is simple that if you and me, if we have to imagine our life as a cyanobacteria, right? So cyanobacteria is like one cell, single cell organism, which lives for say a week or so, and then it dies. Nothing fancy about it. So if you and me are a cyanobacteria, what we may be thinking? Probably we will be thinking that, what is the point of this life? Why am I here? Why am I doing all this stuff? Right? I just come and the earth is the same. And then when I die, the earth is the same. There is nothing changes, because the bacteria, the cyanobacteria, what it sees is just 1 week of life. In that 1 week, it doesn't understand the significance of what the role that it played. It never understood it. It might have died. That's what even you and me, when we talk about the life purpose, what am I doing, how am I changing the world, and etc., we still see a very small fragment of a bigger time period, right? So we talk about our average lifespan is 60, 70 years, and then we want to accomplish something great and then make a fulfillment, make a history for our own self, and then we want to get out of this world, right? In that process, somehow we completely forget that the cosmic nature or the universe is much, much larger than a one individual contributor to it, right? And then every one of us matter. So when he talks about cyanobacteria, the very important thing is each one of us matter. Like if we are a cyanobacteria, we may not understand the whole thing. The whole planet is changing because of every single cyanobacteria, but then it changed, it created. Because of that, we became a human being right now. And then we are having this conversation, which is primarily intellectual conversation, and then trying to understand all these things. So that is the significance of understanding who we are. So that is why we should never discount our own self that, oh, I don't know why am I here. I don't know my purpose. I don't know what am I doing in this life. You don't have to know. The larger purpose is it's always in serving. So I always believe that the passion when people talk about it is doing what they love. And purpose is nothing more than doing what you love to serve others, period. So for me, I love talking, and then serving others is something that I deeply believe that that is a purpose. So when we have that kind of a purpose, we don't have to search for anything outward into our life to understand what is a bigger meaning of life. No, it can be very small, but then in a larger scale we all become the whole self, right, which we are important as a being. So that being said, and he also points out very important thing is over a period of time, the same cyanobacteria is what got absorbed by all the plants, and then the plants right now helping us to exchange carbon dioxide with oxygen. That is a basic thing that we all know. And the very interesting thing is, as we know, every out breath of us, it is becoming an in breath of a plant. So it's becoming an in breath of the any plant, and then the out breath of the plant is becoming in breath for us. So that way we are constantly in a place of exchanging our own, like, the breath with the plant, and then we are interacting. So that is what interconnectedness, or like, interbecoming, like, we are becoming together into someone else together. So that is a very beautifully put one. Somehow I felt so connected to it. And he gives one other example is he talks about a planet. Like, so in this planet, we know that the air that we breathe out, it travels, like, the wind that circulates in the whole earth, it is 150 kilometers per hour, it seems. So where he says that in every 4 to 5 days, in one part of wherever we are breathing out, it can reach the other side of the planet literally. Like, there's some part of it. It's not completely, but literally there's a plant which is next to us. It's breathing my thing. So part of my identity is already gone to the plant, and the plant's identity came to me, and then it is going far away, like, other side of the whole planet. So that's a very, like, deeply connecting thought for me. I'm not sure about you, but then I would allow you to watch that video, try to see how much you can connect to it. And the final story he talks about is a story of mind. So the story of mind he talks about is a very simple thing, like, how we all have our own unique expression to this life. And that's something he calls it as a palette of life. So the palette of life is like, how there is a color ranges which we can pick and start painting in our own way, because we are all an artist in a way. So for that, the example that he gives is, for an example, say a few hundred years ago, there was no piano. Piano is a musical instrument. It was not there. Then someone invented piano with all their intelligence over the different progress of, like, the invention. They invented the piano. So the person who plays piano, his mind is wired completely different. Like, how he has to control all the 10 fingers, or it can be like, how he understands the music notes of each keys and etc. He's completely changed. And his brain, if you do a scan, it seems like, it looks very different, right? So it is evolved with the specific thing of being playing piano. That way, it is not just music, but any part of your life. You can be a teacher, you can be an artist, you can be a computer scientist or a computer professional. So every skill at this moment in our life, whatever we skill that we pick it up, like, it can be dance, singing, it can be anything. We are painting the whole life with that kind of art, right? So when he says that, what he means is, essentially, the unique expressions of our us, like, we are painting the world with a new color. So what he says is, whenever we pick up something, for an example, I'm a information security professional. For an example, if I'm taking my identity of information security professional, from there I may come with my own unique expression of how this information security should be. So that becomes a baseline for someone else in the later age, and then they can start seeing that color. So what he primarily says is, at every time that we were born in, there's a different colors available to take and paint. And that way we are broadening our visibility to the whole world and the whole universe. And other example he shares about is Lady Gaga. So he says that most people say that Lady Gaga, she resembles more like Madonna. And then it is not just like she resembles like Madonna. So Madonna, with her own unique expression, she left some imprint on this world. Probably Lady Gaga, she got inspired by that. She's not copying, but she got inspired, and then she is expressing in her own unique way. So that way, it's becoming our own unique expression. So that way, we are all here experiencing life and expressing it in our own unique way, which is important. So that's how he ends these three stories. And the thought that he leaves us with is sometimes we see ourselves so small. We see ourselves small as like, we are an insignificant being, that things are happening in the universe, then the planet, then comes to a country, then comes a community and society, then comes to family and friends, then comes to me. It is nothing that, I'm changing from inward out. But whereas he challenges that by saying, actually, we with our own unique expression, we start impacting other people who's in around us. And by that, everything, like, the whole universe changes. Like how the cyanobacteria creates a whole atmosphere, right, of oxygen, though the one cyanobacteria would have never understood what it is creating in the long term, like, billions of years we are talking about, right? So we are just impatient to understand it. But then there is a purpose which is much, much larger than we can conceive, or we may not even know for our lifetime. And that's okay. So that way, we are much more peaceful within ourselves. So with that identities, that which is we are connected to everything in this cosmos, there is no more a smaller identity that we want to fight over, right? We don't want to pick a fight and say, this is me, this is you, and we have a difference of opinion, difference of thought, we have to sort this out. No, rather I appreciate your identity, and I'm fine the way that I am, and I will not don't want to argue with you or disturb your state of mind. So that is something I took away from that teaching, like, the Tom Chi, when he talks about these stories. That is a profound understanding for me, to feel that the oneness, the moment we have that oneness with everything around us, there is no need for any kind of a conflict. So the moment we get out of the conflict and suffering, it naturally brings us a inner stillness, because there is nothing to fight for. What are we talking about? See, I used to suffer from one simple thing, is my identity being like, I am fat. Literally, I used to feel that for a very long time. But now there is only one difference. It doesn't mean that I become thin and then become so super good. No, it doesn't mean that. However, I used to beat myself then, literally beat myself. I don't even go in front of people, and I gave up speaking. Literally, I gave up speaking because I felt that, what am I doing with my body? I mean, if I'm telling people how to lead a good life, that also means that I should first fix my body, then I should do it. So that way I was beating myself, right? I have my own idea that I should be look like this before I go in front of and stand in front of people and talk about it. If not, I'm not worthy. That was my core belief, and that is how I used to be. But now, when I'm looking back right now, honestly, like, it doesn't matter to me at all, right? Though I, yes, I want to become thin. That is an intention which I appreciate. I like to feel myself much more healthy, fit, and everything. But then I don't beat myself. I eat what I like. I made a, like, what do you say, peace with that part of me which needs that identity. So this is an example. What I gave you is, the moment you understand, or we understand, the bigger scale of life, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for anything that we come across. Then we can make peace with first ourselves, then with the people who's around us. Like, there is no need that they should agree with us. And it is fine. They can hold a difference of thought perspective. That's absolutely fine. We don't have to get bothered by that. Just only one thing is, they say that it takes two people to make a fight or create a fight, right? So we do our best to hold on to our side of the bargain. When I say our side of the bargain, if there is something that I have to do from my heart, I will do it from my side. At the same time, I may not expect something back from you, and then you should do this to me. I will not have the expectation. I wouldn't hold the other person to fulfill their side of the bargain. Only I am responsible, I give. I wouldn't hold you even if you don't give. So that way, I make peace with the other people. And finally, any situation. So every single situation is We may not understand the reason for the situation when we see it so small, when our mind is so narrow. So that way, we may not even understand the situation. Sometimes the worst situations are the best teachers, right? We all know that. I mean, we know it as a saying. So I can tell you, I've been through my own life ups and downs. I've been through depression. I've been through sadness. I used to beat when I say beat, feel that everyone is like, has some kind of a conspiracy against me. And they don't want my success. They don't want me to live a peaceful life. I used to think all this nonsense, right? Literally. However, now if I look at it, those moments or those situations are exactly the situation which led me to, in this time, in this place, that I have some level of understanding of what it is. I wouldn't say I became like, enlightened or realized, or no. I'm just an aware person. Now I'm aware of what is going within me and around me. And I don't get disturbed by anything that is outwards or inwards. Yes, sometimes there's a small fluctuation that still happens. However, I wouldn't hold myself so strict. Like, even if I lose my mind, that is okay. I accepted myself gracefully, and I accept others gracefully. I accept the situations, whatever, in a much more graceful way as compared to my own self before few years. So that being said, how I'm wrapping up the whole thing is, it is important those identities what we are holding on to, if that is causing suffering to us, it is important to look back and inspect those things and let go of them, right? So that way we have a bigger cosmic identity, which is Aham Brahmasmi, everything is connected. We are becoming together, interbecoming together. So, with that thought, I wanted to end this session. And there is one quote which I somehow felt that it would summarize all this talking and all those things. This quote comes from one of the spiritual teacher is Meister Eckhart. It is not Eckhart Tolle, but then my Meister Eckhart is the one who the Eckhart Tolle, even he borrowed the name from the Meister Eckhart. So he talks about one thing very profound. I'll just read that quote for you. So he says that every object, every creature, every man, woman, and a child has a soul. And it is the destiny of all to see as God sees, to know as God knows, to feel as God feels, to be as God is. Think about it. To see as God sees, to feel as God feels, to know as God knows, to be as God is. That is our inner state of being. So, this state of being comes from complete humbleness. There is no superiority, no ego. I allow you to be with that thought of how we can have that godly nature, because the moment we have it, we don't have much more disturbance in our life. It is much more peaceful. So I allow you to be there, and then I will share this video with you of the Tom Chi. Probably you can watch if you find it interesting, and then you can have your own introspection within you. So that way you may come to some little bit of a clarity with what we are talking about as inner stillness and interconnectedness as a whole concept. So that being said, we come to an end of today, and either we can go for a Q&A, or we can try to do a few minutes of being in silence. It's up to you. So do you have any questions, by the way? Like, whatever we discussed today, if you have any questions, or if you think you wanted to share some thought of yours, if you have different understanding, you want some clarity, please open up and you can ask right now. Anybody? No? Yeah, Tanaji, please.
Yeah. I'm speechless today.
Sorry?
I'm speechless
Oh,
today.
speechless. Okay.
The thoughts you shared today was very tremendous. I love it. Simply love it.
Okay. That's a good place, Tanaji. Thank you.
I will see this video again and again.
Please. So this is to give you a perspective of just coming out of, sometimes, like, the spiritual journey itself become a little more mystic in nature, right? So we know as it a philosophy and concept and ideas, but then we always have this doubt. But then is it really true? I like this to be true, but then I don't know how it is true. Somewhere we also disbelieve all those the things that we get to know as a philosophy or a spiritual teachings itself. So that is where every spiritual tradition, when you talk about, they all talked about interconnectedness and how everything is connected in some form. They all said that. And that a culture or a society where, no, more than a culture, I would say a society where they practice this kind of a spiritual understanding is they're much more open to accept other people. They don't it is just become a little more tolerant. That's what I would say. They become more tolerant with each other. And then they are much more they don't hold on to the separating it's me and it's you. So that is what the whole spiritual itself, spiritual path itself is help us to be, right? Instead of beating ourselves, we see it as a whole being, the whole planet as one thing, and the whole universe is a one being breathing together. So that's what interbecoming is. So with that thought, let's not go further in it. Probably I would say, a minute or 2 minutes of silence just to contemplate what we discussed today of how everything is connected. Probably you can visualize. Yeah, Tanaji.
I think if everyone knows that we are interconnected and we are all one, what
Mm-hmm.
will happen? If every being on the living in the universe
Mm-hmm.
thinks about it and realize that we all are one, all are connected,
Mm-hmm.
not you, not I. If this feeling is converted into all living beings, what will happen?
What will happen is we'll be much more peaceful. We'll be in inner stillness. That's all. There is no conflict. See, where is that fight is coming from? Yeah. When Tanaji, if you look at any conflict, from a petty conflict is within our own self, to when I just walk out of my this room, and then when I face my family, it is as simple as that. It is a difference of thoughts, right? So I expect something, the other person did something else, so that I am not peace there with the other person or the situation. So constantly we are at we are vibrating in a different level, and we are all trying to do is trying to accept the other person, ourselves, the situation as it is. And when it is not happening, we have a problem, right? Just imagine some people I mean, as I said, my example of my life, in my marriage, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, it is just 5 kilometers. And is it really matters that that changes, that creates so many problems in life, right? Just 5 kilometers, someone's identity is completely changed as, oh, I am a Malayali and he's a Tamilian. Tamilian should not marry a Malayali girl. That's a norm. How can we break it? Hmm? It is not going to work, right? So this marriage will not work. Literally, I faced it. So these identities, that is exactly the problems we see. The country is fighting with the other country for what? Why that in Indian border, there's a Chinese army is including, Pakistan army is coming. So who created the line itself in the first place? I appreciate that there is a country patriotism and etc. But on the end of it, is it helping you or it is making you go through all the sufferings? So likewise, every single identity. So what can I do? Just because I was born somewhere, right? I was born in Tamil Nadu. What can I do? I cannot do anything, right? And that way, if you see that, oh, I am a Tamilian, if somebody classifies me, what will I do? I cannot do anything as well, right? I cannot get angry. So likewise, in the larger scale, the moment we understand all these things, we will be at more peace that and more accepting other people and their beliefs as well. So with that, let's observe a minute of silence. Sorry, yeah, Tanaji.
Um, I personally don't believe the borders, any borders of countries and regions.
It
I
is.
don't believe it.
Yeah, that's better. I always believe, when I traveled across, I mean, some 30 countries in one stretch, I always wonder, who the hell, created all these borders, man. And then they treat me as an Indian as a differently from each country, one country to the other country. And I felt somehow it is unfair. And yeah, so the session is officially it's over. So we are just talking a little more on this. It is when I was traveling, I used to feel that a girl who was born in England, she traveled with me, and she was in London, and she is traveling from Trans Siberian from Russia to China in the train along with me. So nice lady. She's a waitress though. Her occupation, the way she works, is a waitress in London. But then she can afford to travel across the world. And then when I reached Vietnam, I saw another girl who was also a waitress. But then she was struggling to take a journey from one part of Vietnam to the other part. So that is from Ho Chi Minh City to Hanoi, right? She was finding it difficult to go from one place to the other because she cannot afford the flight ticket of 10,000 rupees, right? Whereas the other person, she is also a waitress in a different country, but she can take the journey across the world, right? Just because of the place of birth, it changes someone's life completely. That was my biggest realization as well when I was traveling. So how people suffer, and the same job, it is not to do with the person or their ability or anything. It is the same job, more or less, where someone is rewarded so much and where someone is not taken care of. So these kind of inequalities and differences, we eventually will get out of it, and we will make ourselves much more peaceful in a way. So that's all it is. So let's observe a minute of silence and we'll end it in a minute. If you're all okay with that, thank you. So let's observe a silence for a
Sure.
minute. Just come back to the session. Come back. Thank you so much for joining me today. And the one thought, when I was breathing, it is as simple as that. Every breath that I took, it is from an unseen plant in the whole planet. It's from somewhere. The out breath of the plant is what I inhaled. And every out breath that I exhaled, it is going to become a part of some plant in the whole universe or the earth. The same way it is for you as well. Just picture that for a moment and then take your life forward the whole day. And wish you all a wonderful day and then see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you can stay back.
Thanks a lot.